We're going to go ahead and start section 2 of chapter 8. But before we really get into the notes, I have a question for you first. We have two situations at the top. On the left, we have, well, both situations have 45 over 54. I want to know in which one of the two situations can you cross the nines out? When you rewrite 45 is 5 times 9 and 54 is 6 times 9? Or is it what we have on the right where we are adding a 9 top and bottom? Which one of these two situations can you cross the nines out? Well, when you have a 9 over a 9, that's really a special form of 1. So it's multiplying top by 9, bottom by 9 is really a special form of 1. So it's when you are dealing with multiplication here that you can cross out the nines. You cannot cross out the nines when you are dealing with addition. So if you're adding the same thing top and bottom, you can not cross out the nines. You can only do it when it's multiplication. So basically when the whole top and the whole bottom are multiplied by the same thing, you can cross them out. And that's what helps us when we are multiplying and dividing fractions. So as we look down below here, we can cross things out that are multiplication. Now, if you want, you can go ahead and rewrite 10 as a 5 times a 2. We have a 5 on the bottom. We have a 6, and then we have a 6 times an r squared. So things that are multiplied by the top and the bottom, we have a 5 times the whole top, 5 times the whole bottom. We have a 6 times the whole top and a 6 times the whole bottom. So now we can just simplify what we have and write it as one fraction. Remembering when you're multiplying fractions, you multiply the top, multiply the bottom. When we look at what's left on top, we just have a 2, multiply what's on the bottom, the only thing that's left is an r squared. So we get 2 over r squared. When we look over here on the right, we have multiplication here, we have multiplication here, and multiplication here. So it's really like this, where you have three things multiplied together on the top. You have what's in the blue parentheses, what's in the black parentheses, and you have the 9. On the bottom, you have your 9 times 2 times what's in the parentheses. Once again, you can only cross out things that are multiplied by the whole top and the whole bottom. The black parentheses are multiplied by the whole top and the whole bottom. Also, you will notice that you have a 9 times the bottom and a 9 times the top. So now we can go ahead and look at what's left. When we look at what's left, we're left with an m minus 2 on top. We're left with a 2 on the bottom. You cannot cross out the 2's because when you look at the top, it's not 2 times the whole top. You're adding or subtracting a 2 in the top. So we can't do anything more. Now, here, when we look at this, we don't have things being multiplied. Yes, we have a 7b here, we have a 7b here, but the 7b on the top is not multiplied by the whole top. So what we have to do first is we have to go ahead and factor. Now down below in blue is your kind of steps for factoring that we looked at last quarter. So the first thing you want to do is to pull out your greatest common factor. So when we look at the first numerator, we can pull out a 7b from the whole top, and we're left with a b plus 1. Looking at the second top one, there's nothing we can do, so we can leave that. Then we have a 7b on the bottom. When you look at the lower left denominator, we have three terms, so we can do AC factoring, and I'm not going to go through the steps of AC factoring. I'm going to just go ahead and write down the factors. Now, we have the 7b times that times this. We have these multiplied together times this. So now, anything that's multiplied by the top and multiplied by the bottom, we can cross out. We have a 7b here and a 7b here. Now we can also go ahead and cross out a b plus 1 times the top here and a b plus 1 times the bottom here. Now, Whether you cross out the b plus 1 in the first fraction or the top b plus 1 in the second fraction doesn't make a difference. You can cross out one of them on top, one of them on the bottom. Then you look at what's left. We have a b plus 1 on top. We have a b minus 7 on the bottom. Now, looking at the top right one, oh, by the way, with the one we just finished, you cannot cross out the b's because it's not b times the top and b times the bottom, because we only have addition and subtraction, so we can't do anything there. So all we're going to do with the top right one is we're going to go ahead and factor. There's no greatest common factor in the first numerator, but we do have three terms, so we can do AC factoring. And when you go through the process of AC factoring, you would end up with this. The first denominator, there's no greatest common factor other than 1, so that's not helpful. So you can do your AC factoring. The top right one, there is a greatest common factor, so we can pull that out. And now sometimes what's left in the parentheses would factor farther. In this case, it doesn't. And the bottom also has a greatest common factor. So now we have several things multiplied together. And then anything that's the same, top and bottom, you can go ahead and cross out. Well, we have an n plus 2 times the top, n plus 2 times the bottom. We have an n plus 10 and an n plus 10. We also have a 7n times the top, 7n times the bottom. So now we can go ahead and work with what's left. We're left with only an n minus 4 on the top and an n minus 5 on the bottom. Well, here we're dealing with division. Division's very similar to multiplication. Now, instead of dividing by a fraction, you can always multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. That means you flip the second fraction upside down and change it to multiplication. Because dividing by 2, 10 divided by 2, you know, is 5, which is the same as 10 multiplied by a half, which is also 5. So instead of dividing by 2, you can multiply by its reciprocal, which would be 1 over 2. So now, once you have it turned into multiplication, it's just like what we were dealing with before. Anything multiplied by the top and multiplied by the bottom, you can cross out. And then you look at what's left. We're left with a 5 times an x squared on top over a 3. Looking at the right-hand problem, once again, we can go ahead and change the second fraction from division to multiplying by the reciprocal. So I go to multiplication, flip the second fraction upside down, and then we have multiplication again because it was already factored. We look for anything that's the same, top and bottom. These are identical, both multiplied by the top and the bottom. We also have these multiplied by the top and multiplied by the bottom. Now, you will notice that these parentheses are similar, but they're not the exact same. What I'm going to do is to go ahead and leave the first parenthesis alone. We're also left with a 6 on top. And then when I look at the bottom one right here, I'm going to factor out a negative 1. And that leaves me with a negative 5 plus r, which negative 5 plus r, because you can add in any order you want, you could go ahead and rewrite that as an r minus 5. Then you will notice you have an r minus 5 times the top and an r minus 5 times the bottom, so you can cross those out. We end up having a 6 over a negative 1, or just a negative 6. So we're going to just go ahead and continue that. So the first thing you have to do is to factor and then multiply by the reciprocal of the second fraction. So our first numerator does not factor. The second one, there's no greatest common factor. There's 3 terms, so you can do AC factoring. flip, flip the second fraction upside down, and then you want to look to see if there's anything else the same, top and bottom. Now that we have it all factored in, all dealing with multiplication, we have an m plus 7 times top and an m plus 7 times the bottom. And in this case, that's it. There's nothing more we can do. Some of you might be thinking, well, can't we do anything with the 4 and the 8? And no, we cannot, because you notice that 8 is added to something on the bottom. It's not 8 times something. So we just look at what's left. We have a 4m squared on top. We have a 5 times an m plus 8 on the bottom, and that's all we can do. Same idea in the next problem. Instead of multiplying by, dividing by a fraction, you flip the second fraction upside down and change it to multiplication. So I'm going to put that x minus 7 on the bottom up to the top because I'm flipping it. And then when I'm flipping this and putting it on the bottom, I'm also going to do my factoring. So I'm going to pull out my greatest common factor. And then on the first numerator, there's no greatest common factor, and there's 3 terms, so I'll do my AC factoring. And then I'll do the same idea on the bottom, factor that using my AC factoring. And then I want to look to see if there's anything the same top and bottom. Now, this is all that's left. Once again, I'm not able to do anything with this 5. Yes, the 5 is times the whole bottom, but the 10 is not times the whole top. So I can't do anything with the 10 and the 5. So then I just write what I have left. I have an x minus 10 on the top. I have a 5x in my parentheses of an x plus 1 on the bottom. And then we'll do one last problem. Once again, you want to try to do your factoring and multiply by the reciprocal. Now, the first fraction, there's nothing I can do to factor. Now, when I take this and put it on the top, I'm going to pull out my greatest common factor. And then when I take this and put it on the bottom, I'll also pull out my greatest common factor. Not 8, 6. Now, I have multiplication here again. So then I can go ahead and cross anything out. I have this on the bottom, this on the top. And then I can go ahead and take a look at my 2. I have 2 times the top, 2 times the bottom. Then I can look at what's left. I'm left with an x plus 8 on the top, and I'm left with a 2 on the bottom. And once again, you cannot cross the 2 and the 8 out and simplify those because it's not 8 times the top. One last word problem here. We have an area of a parallelogram, which area is base times height. Now, we're told that our area is an x squared plus 2x minus 15. We are told that our base is this, and we are trying to find our height. Well, to get h by itself, all I have to do is to go ahead and divide. Divide by what h is being multiplied by. Well, you'll notice we can go ahead and factor the top. The bottom, there wasn't anything we can do to factor. And when we factor the top, we get an x plus 5, and we get an x minus 2. You'll notice you have an x plus 5 top and bottom, so you can cross those out. And we're left with an x minus 2 for our height. And in this case, we are not given any units, so this would just be our answer.